Hey everyone! So last Christmas I got a Marvel What If novel called What If Wanda Maximoff and Peter Parker Were Siblings? A Scarlet Witch and Spider-Man story. As you're probably thinking right now, it explores the idea of what would happen if Wanda had been taken into adoption of Richard and Mary Parker and left at Uncle Ben and Aunt May's house with Peter. While I was reading it, I learned that Wanda wore a custom homemade costume before she donned her usual classic outfit. So I decided to open Clip Studio Paint and draw a concept based on what was described in the book. There may be a bit of spoilers in this if you haven't read it, but nothing too major, and if you're okay with it, feel free to stick around. It starts in Chapter 8, Field Trip, where Peter talks to Wanda about creating a secret identity. He has the idea of taking her to the Baxter Building so the Fantastic Four can experiment with her powers and advise who could mentor her. When deciding a costume for her appointment, Wanda mentions, "I have the red eye mask I wore last Halloween. It has red sequins on it." It was part of a devil costume, but she didn't want to wear the rest of that, and instead, she decided to use her Glinda the Good Witch suit. So the whole thing is described as with red, pink, and silver confection. Originally, I pictured it looking like the one from one of the recent Wicked films, as the dress didn't have long sleeves. But since it's likely the book takes place around the 2010s, much like the MCU, the suit would look more like, the one from the original Wizard of Oz film. Although, the first Wicked film is mentioned as a description to describe the location where Spider-Man and Scarlet Witch are taking down criminals. So I think it starts in 2019, where they're still in high school, and then time moves to 2024 as they go to college. As I was working on this project, I did a similar technique that Love to Draw manga does when creating concepts of herself as video game characters, where she first does a standard pose as a test before she does a more dynamic pose. I looked at a variety of women's Glinda costumes, even the actual character herself from the film, for reference. It was challenging because each brand, like Ruby's, Spirit, and Halloween costumes, had different interpretations of the costume as the creators tried to replicate it. Differing details such as transparent sleeves versus opaque sleeves, how many butterfly accessories it had, and different star patterns. Trying to pay attention to them as much as possible, I noticed the dress had a mixture of 5 pointed stars and 8 pointed stars. The book never mentions what kind of shoes or other footwear Wanda dons, so I just decided to go with regular sneakers. For the coloring session, again, I use Clip Studio Paint, and it has a lot of unique textured tools for various brushes, pens, and pencils, even a paint bucket just to easily fill one specific area. Now, the novel said it was a red sequin mask, meaning it had shines and sparkles, so I started with a regular shade of red and used the glitter brush as it lightens up the particles, making it look more pink and white. I also wanted to add some more solid red, so I used a running color spray airbrush to make it look red in some areas while still getting a shiny feeling in other areas. I also made her sneakers red because, why not? I mean, the novel doesn't even mention what kind of footwear, but it did say it was red, pink, and silver. I also used a bright shade of pink for most of the dress and reduced the opacity on the shoulder puffs and arm sleeves, but more for the former. I downloaded a star brush for the 5-pointed ones and made sure they were smaller than the ones with the 8 points. For those, I just used a pre-existing tool called Sparkle, which had 4 points for each time you drop them on your canvas, and luckily, you can also rotate them into different positions. So I dropped one sparkle pointing up, down, left, and right, and one with 4 diagonals as separate layers, centered them, merged them together, and just duplicated them in different spots. I had to make sure they weren't too gray, but just enough, to give them a reflective silver look. I used the same glitter brush for the belt, I don't know what it really is, and the diamond on the front, only this time I went with black. I tried using a light gray, but that just made the results even more white. So I went with a pure black and got the reflective silver that I wanted. In hindsight, I forgot to think about where I was going to draw any butterfly decorations, so I just downloaded a 3D model, converted it to regular lines to make it look like it was drawn, and colored it the same way I did with the belt and diamond. The only thing I wasn't satisfied with was the thickness of the outer lines, so after a few different experiments, I decided to take a new layer, trace it with a dark gray, turned off the first outline, turned on extract line, and reduced the black fill and edge threshold. So yeah, it looked pretty good for my first try on Wanda Maximoff's, or for this adaptation, Wanda Parker's prototype Red Wonder suit. For the more dynamic pose, I used a position where Wanda was ready to fight by having her legs spread out and arms raised a bit as she powers up her magic. Because of the latter, I thought it would make sense to have her hair blown like there was some wind coming from her own powers. Thanks to the eyedropper tool, I was able to copy and drop the same colors and write a couple notes to remind myself of which one's opacity had to be reduced for the few layers. Although one of the things I probably forgot to include was the shadows for Wanda's dress, but figuring it out wasn't that hard. I just used the same shadow for the shoes and made it a little darker. For her magic powers, every artist has different techniques on how they draw it, so I referenced one image that had a lightning-like effect. First, I started with dropping a couple pink dots over her hands and reduced their opacity, and then I filled them with white cores using the soft airbrush. Then I used the direct draw option from the figure tool. It basically gives you straight lines, polylines, curves, and a few geometric shapes. So I went with the ellipse, or circle, to give it a red outline, and I just scribbled with different pens for an uneven effect, and carefully drew a white core on top of them. The outer lighting lines, I thought, were going to be challenging at first, partly because the pen tools I've been using are pretty round, and lightning has very sharp and angular edges. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it would take a lot of practice and redoing with all the takes I've been recording. Then I took one of my ocean wave tools I downloaded months ago, and they had the exact results I needed for the effect. So I created a new layer, used the same red from the base, duplicated it, changed it to white, and erased as much of the edges as possible while leaving the cores in the middle. I wanted some smaller particles randomly flying out as well, so I repeated the same technique. So there it is, Wanda Parker's red wondersuit before becoming Scarlet Witch in the acclaimed What If Marvel novel. I did make a few adjustments outside of recording, but other than that, I'm pretty happy with what I did so far. Making it as accurate to the Glinda character and what else was described as possible was a unique challenge. Seanan McGuire's intent for the book has created a refreshing costume no one's ever seen before. It feels a lot like other Spider-Man adaptations where Peter starts with making his costume out of sweats and sweaters. That may have been the point of what the writer was going for. On top of that, I enjoyed reading it so much that I even thought about potentially storyboarding the entire novel someday, but I'll stop here for now. I hope you liked watching me bringing a costume to life in Clip Studio Paint. Thanks for watching, happy holidays, and I'll see you in 2026. Later.